And we're live. Welcome, everybody. And welcome, Kadeem Blaize. Thanks for joining, man. It's great to have you. Uh, it's been a minute, a bit
Julian,
longer
thanks
than
for
usual.
thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. No, appreciate it. Um, so quick, Kadeem, just a quick introduction. We're going to be talking a little bit about architectural visualization, but give us a quick run through about your experience and what you're about.
Yeah, so my name's Kadeem Blaize, everyone. I'm a practicing architectural designer with a keen interest in architectural visualization and 3D modeling. Basic runaround about me.
Sweet, man. And just a quick background of me, a little bit on where we overlap. We've worked a little bit on a couple of different fronts in the past. I'm a 3D artist and graphic designer. And yeah, we're going to get a little bit into we talked a little bit before kicking off on our design process, right? Just to kind of contextualize how it is that we're looking at architectural visualization in terms of what does our workflow look like today with everything that's been popping up this past year and all these advances in software. So um, for those that may not be familiar with a formalized design process, usually we'll start off with research or pre-planning, right? Not a lot of rendering or graphics going on there, but then you get into a conceptual idea, and there we talk about real basic drawings or diagrams, even just keeping it simple, telling a story. And then schematic, you lay out a plan. It's getting a little bit more detailed, right? And then design development, where you actually show what we've been basically showcasing leading up to this talk about photoreal rendering, right? Which really takes use on fully visualizing and articulating the idea and passing that off. So with that, I mean, is there anything there that you would throw in terms of what, at least maybe from an architectural standpoint for you, is there anything there that you consider?
Right. I mean, architectural design pretty much falls in the same realm, in the same process you just mentioned. And again, I think everybody has their personal take on that, I would say in some sense. Whereas for me, I tend to follow a rule that I use throughout anything that I do, and I follow the triple E. And what I mean by that is that I go through a process with evaluation, experimentation, and then executions, following that same spectrum, but more in a more personal phase. Whereas evaluation, like I start to brainstorm, what do I want? What outcome do I want to get from my design with all these sketches and pretty much preliminary ideas. Experimentation is just adapting, different ideas, throwing them all together, seeing how they work out with each other. And then execution, just basically take all that stuff and just go with that. So it has the
Yeah.
same phases, I guess, as schematic, conceptual, but more in a more personal projection, which works for me. Again,
Yeah.
everybody has their way of doing things, but this is just more of a way I think it suits me in a way. Um, and that's the way I usually do my process
There's
in the beginnings.
right. There's always kind of that give and take, right? Of like a
Mhm.
general skeleton or wireframe that you kind of follow, and then you kind of
Right,
have
right,
to feel things out as you go, right?
exactly.
Yeah. Um, for so in on that thread, let's say like for example, talking earlier on the process for conceptual or for schematic, I find that a big thing not taking a visualization all the way through is kind of knowing when to call it and maybe take it out of 3D or just do it 2D. And then now there's the question of, do you just use AI, to make a whole bunch of images that you present an idea with, and then from there you start to rationalize it, right? I guess I don't know. What's your take with that?
I mean, again, I think that goes with personal preference in some sense. Some people aren't really familiar with AI as yet, and they tend to use a sketch format, for their preliminary idea evaluations. Some people tend to use images, Pinterest, grabbing images from everywhere else. Some people like photography. So I feel like it's more of a personal gesture, like say, I mean, if somebody chooses whether to do something versus something else, what's easier for them in some sense. I don't think anyone's subjected or directed to like a specific way of doing something. So Me personally, I like photography. I just love the sense of how a story is being depicted within an image.
Mm.
And from that, you can start to pull out a lot of different references from that. Whereas I think you're more on the AI side of generative like information. So again, that's another way of doing things. And I can't really like pick and choose. You know, they're all strong like options. So
Yeah. So when it comes to inspiration, that's interesting. When it comes to inspiration, you don't quite think about time management when it comes to that. That's sort of just like an. I guess
can
there's a
you
difference between.
elaborate a little more?
Sorry.
Can you elaborate on that a little more? I wasn't too clear.
No, I'm thinking towards because for me the main reason to lean to AI because I love photography
Mhm.
too, or
Right.
photography is a tremendous tool, right? Um,
Right.
but AI does save a lot of time in terms of like just getting the ball rolling on a concept or idea. For me, it kind of like I feel like a lot of the work in terms
But
of
what if you do have the idea already stipulated in your head? You don't want to really generate something out of nowhere. What if you already have that idea, but you want to just see how you can extinguish it in a easier format without changing it that much? Do you think AI still plays a part in that, or is it more of looking at references that talk the same language?
I think it's both. I think because ultimately it's I can blend the sketch or I can take a real bare bones like wireframe that I make on 3D or in 2D and I can blend that in with an AI image generator and just augment that inspiration process. I guess, but something that I was coming into was maybe there's a difference between inspiration and reference gathering. I mean, they're
Hmm.
definitely, as I said out loud, absolutely. Um, but okay, so let's think about like more down the pipeline though, um, in terms of really getting into what it takes to okay considerations for the schematic because that transition from concept like you can kind of build a narrative and however you
Okay.
choose to kind of use AI or uh, gather references. I mean, if it's for you, it's photography. Have you dabbled in any like photography manipulation with any of these new tools?
Not to call the kettle black, but I've been starting to use AI a lot, honestly. Again, it's very intuitive, and one thing I like about it is that it starts to pitch ideas that you didn't really think about in some sense, you know. I started doing a lot of collage imaging, whereas I'll take a bunch of references, feed it into it, and it'll spit back out something that almost resembles what I want in some sense,
Mm.
but gives me another perspective of how to look at it, you know? And I kind of appreciate that instead of me just looking in one direction, it gives me an alternative to come up with something new and different. And I think that's in the same line of what you're talking about in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's I guess there's many ways that you could incorporate these tools, and the way that you're describing it, I see
Mhm.
you're building out from something that's more personal and more emotional to you, and then just having a little light touch, or it might help, right?
Right,
At least like in that
right.
aspect. Interesting. And when talking about using, let's step away from AI a little bit and think more in terms of visualizing on a more technical aspect, not so much like technical, like into the
Mhm.
nitty gritty of like details, but more so in terms of how do we arrive at this idea? How do we arrive to visualize this idea or this design, right, in the more schematic phases or later on phases in a way that's efficient now? I mean, in the sense that aside from like picking out a software, right? If it used to take maybe a few weeks to get animation or a day or two to get a rendering out, and now, I mean, we could talk about any way that you kind of view this or kind of what the path is forward, but we still see some people have processes where it kind of still takes that or they end up outsourcing those solutions outside, which could be a solution, but that hurdle of learning a 3D software in order to be able to do a rendering for those type of phases of design. Um, Does that end up paying off in the long run, you think? Like in terms of how much time it still takes to kind of get those results?
Right. Well, off of experience, I tend to I tend to lean more towards having a tool that we can use in the quick schematic phase that gives you really preliminary results on something that fairly looks decent, that you can start to manipulate, in-house, something that's quick and easy to manipulate, nothing that you're basically sending it out to outsourcing and trying to get back and doing a bunch of iterations and trying to get to a solution. Whereas if you do it in-house, you have somebody that knows how to use that quick software. And I'm not talking something that's like really complicated. I'm talking one of the easiest solutions to manipulate something really fast, a really fast output,
Hmm.
that's very visual. The UI user interface isn't as technical and it's very hands-on, and it's a good approach for quick design schemes. And I think that's something that'll be very handy within a design uh, atmosphere in some sense, because one, it will save you money, save you time, and it gives you the ability to manipulate multiple iterations without any questioning or hurdles within sending back and forth through outsourced companies and stuff like that. So I think it's a great tool, and then like there's a lot of them out there that are very easy to use, and I kind of go for that instead of again looking for people that would try to create a post result or an end result to something, whereas you can manipulate whatever you want in house from that.
That, yeah, but that also, I have found myself where maybe you spend as much time coordinating with someone that you're outsourcing to versus just taking it on. Um,
Correct.
but that's also just part of finding the right people, right?
That too, as well. But I mean, I think if you take the time to, I mean, that again goes with the, I don't know, with the sense of passion, or not really passion, but what that person actually wants out of that result. Like, do you rather pay someone a ton of money trying to do something that you have an idea about, or you rather put your effort and money into learning something on your own, or uh, gaining all that knowledge so you can create something without even looking for another option, and you get up with the same results, but then you get a more personal, I guess, a personal touch on it that you don't really have to keep going back and forth, back and forth. You create your quick iterations, you manipulate it however you want. And then again, when you don't feel, if you're not as confident for creating a end result, take that idea and give it to someone and then just have them refine it, that gives a better quality on it. And then in that sense, you've done what you wanted. It's not a lot of back and forth. You're not wasting money. You're not wasting time. And you get a great result. So, and you're happy with the end game.
Yeah, that's a big point right there, is the collaboration.
Hmm.
Because ultimately, I mean, if you've learned one 3D software, there's only so many branches, right? In a sense, like maybe two or three, possibly a fourth that's like way more technical. But if you
Right.
kind of start breaking in with one software, you basically are able to break it into learning three or four more that are very similar, right? Or operate.
Exactly. And
Um,
each does their own thing too. It's
yeah.
not just speculated to one thing. They all have their advantages. So it's not like you're stringent or stuck to one element. There's a ton of them out there that all do different things. So, but then again, that goes if you're passionate enough to go through and follow through with that, to try to learn and understand them, for your personal gain, or you just rather not take that headache, and find the easy way out. But yet you spend more time and money trying to get to a solution.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly enough, I know the metaverse isn't as it's kind of lost a lot of hype, but the one of the Nvidia online conferences lately announced this platform. I think it's available. I'm not sure if it's still in a closed invite, but it's basically this one space to create movies, video games, 3D renderings, 3D experiences, and whatnot on one single platform. So you could create assets for it on pretty much all these. There's a giant roster of softwares, all the big names. And you can basically just plug in all these different assets that people can build anywhere on any computer, anywhere around the world. And this one platform by NVIDIA, you just log in and you're able to start world building in this one
Oh
sort
wow.
of 3D environment that's all running on cloud servers that have tremendous GPUs.
Right. That's insane. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I didn't botch it, but
I think I
but
saw
that's
that.
pretty
I
much the
think I saw
gist.
it in an
Yeah.
email somewhere. It's probably the wrong uh feed that I'm explaining, but I think I saw something to do with that. They were releasing this new AI platform. It could have been that I saw.
Omniverse. I think that's what they're calling it. NVIDIA
Yes, something like
Omniverse.
that. Yes.
Yes. Cool. All right. Sorry, a bit of a tangent, but anyway, on the point of collaboration, that's just something that came to mind. Because yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think like it's an inner fear of mine a little bit. It's like the deeper I
Mhm.
dive into one software, the more I'm missing out on another, or something like that.
I mean, I
Um,
don't think it's only you, man. I had my days of that, honestly.
yeah.
Not because I didn't want to, but you start to you start to feel like, oh, like I feel there's an easier way or there's another way to do this. And then when you look up a different software, like I think they found a solution. So I try to learn that, and I start software hopping and trying to see what it is that I'm actually catered to and what do I want in the end game, just
Right.
trying to minimize time and the easy way out. So you're not alone on that one.
Yeah. Ultimately, the saving time is really just like, especially lately, like flipping on the switch to record and then just in like 20, 30 minutes, like have something, you know, that starts to really be like, okay, wow, like 80% of it is done in 20, 30 minutes, you know?
Right.
Um, of course, that depends. I'm talking about production. Like once you have it resolved and you're just pushing it through to make it look good, and developing the graphic. Um, so you had sent me some of these renderings. Should we pull them up? Kind of start talking
Yeah,
that a
go
little
for
bit.
it.
Let's see. So the first one we're looking here is British Virgin Islands on the west end. Um,
So yes, do you want me to go into explaining what the idea about this rendering was, or just my use of software, why I use this, why I chose this?
well, let's try this. First, I'll try to guess what software this was.
Okay,
um,
I'll let you go for that.
I think this might be Unreal or
Well,
Twin
it's a branch
Motion.
off of
Twin
Unreal.
Motion.
There you go.
Ah. um, okay. So yeah, I mean, take us through it a little bit.
So yeah, this was just a quick concept idea of what I was trying to go for. It was a quick design competition. I wouldn't necessarily call it a competition. It was more of a personal endeavor that I was trying to go for to see how I can come up with a quick design, a quick rendering for a quick conceptual idea of what this space or volume is supposed to be technically. So, without me spending a bunch of time, trying to pick out the right things, material, camera views, set in the right scene, the right foliage, all that stuff. I wanted to see what software can I use to create quick manipulations or quick visuals of what this area is, applying quick material sets, quick lighting, see how shadows are playing, how lights work. I had this idea of this illumination around the entry area, with this ambient light. And I couldn't really portray that in a sketch or anything. I had to use a software that will be able to apply the element really fast without taking up much time again. So I catered towards Twinmotion because one, it was a new platform that they brought out that basically used nanites and I forgot the name of the actual interactive render that they started to manipulate into the software,
Yeah, we're
and it
basically
gave you
sorry for
go for
people
it.
that might not know. I think that's the isn't it like an accelerated? lighting method,
Yeah,
basically, where it
exactly.
takes less to calculate the lighting, or it's live
Correct.
already.
Because it looks at the geometry as one piece instead of individualized items, and it tends to go around every single formation of the planar surfaces of all the geometry within that object. So in layman's term, basically, they just honestly catch more shadows on objects in a denser form. Instead of creating fake shadows, they tend to give you a bit more realistic edge to it. And that's all it is, basically.
Gotcha.
And what and I chose this because one, I wanted to learn a new software other than the most popular Lumion that everyone uses. But I think this software tends to give you a bit more edge on detail and realism. And I was just testing out the waters just to see how easy it was. I don't have to do much. In Lumion, you have to set up a lot of settings. When you want a specific result, have to set up a 2D perspective. You have to add certain lights. You have to add global illumination, play with the settings to make sure it's all that. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of tweaking. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a very easy user interface. But at the same time, there's a lot of
Yeah.
technical items that you have to manipulate in order to get a specific result.
Gotcha.
Whereas Twinmotion, it gives you it right off the bat. You don't really have to do much manipulation. It gives you the correct light settings, the correct vantage points, and the correct camera settings for you to apply a quick scheme on something
It,
without having to adjust anything.
yeah, it's all built
Go ahead.
for architectural visualization, basically. It's like
Yes,
streamlined for that
basically.
process. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I find that when lighting is a big deal too. It's just better to go to 3D because a lot of
Mhm.
stuff can be articulated in Sketch or diagrams, and like painting light in Photoshop is actually like very doable and very
I
valuable
was just going to
skill.
ask you about that. How does that work for you and Photoshop, knowing that you're a 3D artist?
What's that?
No, I was going to ask, how does that work for you? I know, like, you're being a 3D artist, you're using Photoshop mostly.
Yeah. For lighting
Yeah,
in
and adding
particular.
like artificial lighting or any
Yeah.
contextual lighting.
So when I started doing architectural visualization, I was 16. I was doing it for a class in high school. They had like just opened it up, and we were doing SketchUp and Photoshop. And before I could even get a handle on V-Ray, I was just using basically the line work in SketchUp and then building out a render in Photoshop. So I would take a whole like just wireframe perspective view or front view or plan of SketchUp, and I would just apply photos and textures. And then I'd use the burn dodge tool, masks, white
Hey, that's
brush,
cheating, man.
and black brush for highlights and shadows. So I was literally like sort of photo compositing, collage painting in Photoshop
Right.
to create renderings. I hadn't thought about that in a while, actually. So anyway, that's how it started. But no, now it's like when I have to do light, I still have to I still just prefer to jump into 3D. Even though like because of that experience, I got really good at painting light because I'd throw
Mhm.
in like light fixtures or whatever and end up like, you know, doing this light is much closer to the wall, so it should be brighter, but then also a lot brighter like just in the center, like
Right, right. I mean, that also builds your eye for detail, in some sense.
right.
From going through that whole process. Now you kind of appreciate detail in some sense. And I think
Yeah.
that happens to me as well too. And like from what I did in certain things, like photography, for example, there's a lot of different light sources and how light hits reflections. I tend to replicate that into a rendering, and if I don't see the right quality, I try to nitpick at it so I can get back to that quality
Yeah.
because I already know what I want in some sense. So I get you on that one.
I mean, you're simulating it all at once, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the huge
exactly.
advantage too. It's gonna be on target like right away.
Correct.
What I'm talking about is more like you could do. I still use those techniques as like an embellishment over a
Mhm.
graphic, right? So like, not that I would like fix this one in any particular way, especially not on lighting. Um, But you know, like for example, God rays. Like I might do a mask of like where the trees are or where the light post is on the left hand side, and on those cavities, the wooden cavities there, like just with a soft brush, like fade in rays from the top left where the sun seems to be, and just make it like super 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 light. And like I find that just like almost like applying a filter over an image. I mean, that's
Mhm.
where you get more like camera effects involved, right? And that's like that hyper
True.
real look. But
Correct.
yeah, I find like if you just like do a wash or a filter, like some type of thing over it and make it like super subtle, like almost like it's grained from a camera film or something like that, it just like
Right.
evens the whole thing out, you know?
Agreed.
Um anyway, that's like the Photoshop stuff. You like that's more not totally not something a client is gonna usually
Right.
appreciate,
Right.
right? Let's see. I wanted to go over to your next image. Whoops. There we go. Man, this one's neat.
Which one are we looking at
Uh,
now?
so this is the one that you sent me today. It's like the grassy foreground with then like a stone wall and vertical windows with a tree in front of it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, what do you think software that I use for this one?
Right. Um, hmm. I'm gonna bet 3ds Max. No, it's not 3ds Max. Uh, you know what? I'm gonna go with Twinmotion again. Yeah,
So why did you say not three? Why were you leaning towards 3ds Max?
I was going towards 3ds Max. Maybe 3ds Max when you like first started using it, not the more recent stuff I've seen from you.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong with that, but some of the light some of the absence of light reflections has me thinking it's not 3ds Max. That it's like more like a real time display. But maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, you're right. You're right.
Oh yeah,
So this is actually Unreal Engine.
Unreal. Okay.
Yes. So this is me getting more nitpicky on trying to see. So, oh, I'm sorry about that. So my initial idea was to see how I can elevate my end result and how I can apply textures. Grass was like my biggest thing on this in this project. And I had a hard time trying to manipulate realistic grass into emotion and Lumion. They all look very cartoonish. And in order to apply it everywhere on a surface, but still have notches, like grass isn't always perfect in everywhere. Sometimes you
Right.
have a bit of like patches and spots in little areas. It's not all consistently green. And my biggest approach on this was grass and also reflections. I wasn't getting the exact reflection I wanted in Twinmotion, so I went over to Unreal just to see how they represented their new reflection upgrade in their software. And supposedly it gave a lot of new reflection backgrounds. So basically, you're adding a background within the glass so it looks like it's reflected on something, which is pretty cool because you have a lot of different reflection types that you can use to apply to that glass, whether it's in a nature atmosphere, a city, rural versus urban area. And it gives a little touch to the actual context that you're looking at. Again, trees, grass was another big thing again, just to see how I can manipulate a surface that's not very planar. This model came right out of Revit, and I used sort of a hilly context just so I can see how I can apply this surface to a non-planar surface and if it would adapt correctly in some sense.
Gotcha.
And believe it or not, it worked. It could be just a little more, but again, this render literally took probably on average 15 to 20 minutes to get to that point, which is pretty cool because again, a lot
15.
of these.
All right, 15
15
to
minutes, 15 to 20 minutes from start of applying materials to the end result in lighting and all that stuff.
gotcha. So not the modeling, but the
No, the
adding
modeling part was separate.
materials and the
Yes, just
lights.
adding
Yeah.
materials and setting up the scene. Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish it was. I wish it was that fast.
And man, we're getting there.
Any questions on this one though? In terms of, what my preference in lighting was, why I chose the colors I did.
I
Again, this was
guess
just, sorry, go ahead.
no. I'm just kind of taking it in and wondering. I mean, where my head's at with it, that I'm wondering is if this is Unreal and it came from Revit, because Revit is a software used to do construction documents and actually plan out the actual building or project.
Correct.
And then this is Unreal, which you could do easily a VR or like a game like experience to the file that you've set up, right? So
Yes.
can you basically simulate the experience of the project as it's going to be built? Maybe not, I don't know how close to this quality it can get in a context that I'm talking about, but
You're talking about a phase in animation, starting from ground up to where this building was, stacking up, creating the facade, and coming up to a final product or
I'm
something else.
thinking more in terms of like, let's say today, I slap on a VR headset and I jump into this file because it's Unreal Engine, and
Mhm.
then there's design changes tomorrow. Can I jump in tomorrow in the evening again and experience those updates like at this type of?
Oh yeah, of course you can. I
Yeah.
mean, now with this whole new interactive applications or add-ins that these softwares have now, it's a matter of just clicking an update button or refresh, and the model automatically updates to what you have currently going on in that external software. So it's like a patched in version of what you're working on. I think Revit has a really good grasp on that with these other external softwares, rendering engines. Whereas I forgot the name that they actually call it. I don't know, can't remember the name, but it's just basically a plugin that you add into, I don't know, Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, Lumion, and it's a matter of just hitting a refresh and it updates to exactly what it is that you're working on. So
The
if you have like
dynamic
a minor
link,
change,
basically. It's like a
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
right?
basically.
So, and textures and lights are all updating then from Revit.
Yes and no. So this is where software start to disperse, and they become their own entities in some sense.
Yeah.
So for Revit, I know for a fact, it's been in tight grasp with Enscape, which is another rendering engine. But I think they're mostly dedicating Enscape towards Revit interface in some sense because one, you can be able to manipulate all the materials, the light, and all that thing, all those stuff within Revit, and
Mm-hmm.
Enscape just gives you a visual idea of what it is you're looking at. You cannot manipulate anything within Enscape because it's all feeding from Revit. Whereas
Gotcha.
Unreal, you're applying all your lights. I mean, you could bring in your lights and your materials into Revit, but because of the whole shift in software, a lot of these items like materials and the UVs and how they apply to a certain surface, they're not the same as how Unreal builds their interface and how materials and the UVs add to a specific geometry. So you get a lot of interference. Some are going to be the materials are going to be expanded if you bring it in, or it's going to be like offset or diagonal. The UVs are all messed up because they're not the same. They don't
Gotcha.
coordinate correctly in some
So
sense.
here's an interesting thing I've experienced lately with that issue. So basically, like
Mm-hmm.
because I started out doing all my modeling in Rhino. Well, I didn't start doing all my modeling in Rhino. I mentioned I did SketchUp, but I've been transitioning more and more into Blender as my main tool. And
Mm-hmm.
now is that I'm catching up on actually modeling and sculpting in Blender because I would do everything in Rhino and just bring it
Right.
into Blender, and I was reverse engineering Blender. But so
Working
it,
backwards.
yeah, basically like, all right, what do I need to for a great rendering? Like great lighting. Okay, so let me just model something how I know how to, and then let me just do lights. and then let me just do textures. Um, but I got really good at importing, exporting is where I was going with that between softwares. And something I would do is like have this system of like, okay, I have to do, before I export, I have to convert to mesh, then like reduce faces. And then when I import in
Right.
the other software, I have to subdivide and then reduce faces again. Like, then I can bevel if I set sharp edges. Um, and slowly but surely, plugins are like evolving software has made that much better and easier. Like they get better at communicating or updating with each other, so that
Mhm.
there's less hassle there. But there's this plugin that I reviewed on the channel that was Chat GPT inside Blender, and the cool thing is you can build your own plugins using Chat GPT like that. So you could be like, um, whatever, if it's like something that you're importing through and you're like, I need to match, I mean, you can already kind of copy UVs. If you fix the UVs once, you can like copy it over to a new one, but you could
Mhm.
set automated steps basically that are done within Blender, just asking ChatGPT to build a plugin, you know.
So it
Gets a
automatically does it as you
right,
go.
so it creates a button to do all those things that you usually do in sequence.
Oh,
um
that's nice. That's beyond me, man. I'll leave that for you.
It's beyond me too. That's the hilarious thing is like I don't know anything about code or like building assets, like engineering assets like that. I mean, I
Yeah, yeah.
understand it at a surface level. I'm not an engineer, um, but I'm still able to read the code and like report the errors I'm getting in Blender
Right,
and
right.
have
I
the
mean,
AI
that's
fix
one thing.
itself.
That's one of the things I love about Blender. And you're the first one that actually brought me onto that whole Blender interface. There's a lot, like Blender just goes down a rabbit hole, you know, like there's a lot of things that you can gain from using Blender. And the fact that a lot of these softwares that I use now, it's sad that they don't actually work with that platform because I would love to dive into that. But there's
Yeah.
such a shift in, like, again, comparing these softwares and trying to entangle them into different, like, exporting and importing and changing all these parameters. It bogs you down a lot, and for me, I just rather stick to one thing, stay in one area that I know for now until
Oh
like
yeah.
something comes up, and then I can make that transition. But Blender is an amazing program. I do not have anything bad to say about it. Because again, like, it's unstoppable, and it's free. That's the good part.
Man,
So,
that's what the free and open source. That's what really
mhm.
does it for me because it's the first software I use where if I can't do something in that software, someone somewhere has made it so that I
Has
can
done it.
do that in that software. If it's on GitHub, if it's on Blender Market, if it's on like all these little pockets of the internet where people
Mhm.
upload things to, like, yeah, super interesting. Let's take a look at one more.
Yep.
Um, let's I mean this one's pretty straightforward. I wanted to actually talk to you about these because I mean
Which one
this
are we
is a
looking at right
one
now?
that's fantastic too, but there's this one is so just like I couldn't believe it when you showed me because I just usually I can tell,
Right.
photo or rendering. Funny enough, Adobe had a live stream today at 2 p.m.
Mhm.
That was pretty interesting. But they played the game of render or image or render or photo with the people that come on, so they have to guess
Yeah.
what's a render or what's a photo. And they did pretty good, but like, I'd say I did pretty good too. But like when you showed me this one really got me. So yeah, I mean, was this a
Which
nightmare to
one?
do or
Which
was
one
this fun to
are we
do?
looking at right now? I'm sorry.
With the McLaren,
Oh, the McLaren one.
the
Are you
blue
look?
McLaren. In
Okay. Are you looking at the one that's showing the front view?
I'm looking at the front view, but let's switch it over to the back view, that rear view, because that one also is just fantastic.
All right, so this was one of my pretty recent projects.
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't anything too particular, like it wasn't a client involved or anything. It was just me just playing around. advancing my ways and understanding the software, applying materials, lighting. So my biggest take on this one was basically how can I use a specific space, a confined space, and try to create some type of realism within there. Apart from architecture, architecture is still a big part in this, because of the atmosphere, the surroundings, the location that it's in. But I wanted to see how you can take like again, blend in structure, rigid porcelain lintel items versus curvature, organic shapes, and creating a contrast within an image, and it creates a very nice context. But then I wanted to see how I can make this thing look real. That was the main goal. Apart, I was trying to shy away from architecture because again, I'm not only into architecture in some sense. I go more on the visualization in some sense for anything basically product related, automotive, and architecture. So it's not really
Mm.
stringent to one category. So for this one, I wanted to see how I can elevate my use of light in some sense because light, believe it or not, plays a tremendous part on how something looks. Everything has reflection and everything uses light. Light reflects on anything. And specific areas, like cars, they take a lot of reflection. And you have to know how to manipulate that reflection to look real. So for this software, I used 3ds Max and Corona Render, which I think to me is one of the most powerful engines out there. Um, I wouldn't say this isn't something I think that people should learn right off the bat. If you're really dedicated and you want to go for it, by all means, you'll be a champ for that. But it's not really a very intuitive and practical software. It's very behind the scenes, very bogged down with information, and you have to really input to get an output. It doesn't give you straight off the bat results. You have to add your lights, you'll get a dark scene. I think it's pretty much like Blender where you have to like create your own scenes in some
Hmm.
sense. But
Yeah.
I think it gets a little more deeper into that because it gets very technical. And
So
for this one, sorry, go ahead.
no, I just want to kind of compare. Then, how long did this
Yeah.
one take you compared to the Twin Motion one that we spoke about, or the
So this
Unreal one?
one,
Yeah.
right, excluding the import because again, I didn't construct this. This was just a random model that I pulled off the internet, but it was a high poly model, so I could get every single detail in there. This took about, I would say, roughly 3 hours at least, just from start to end in terms of rendering. And
But
with my graphic, well, I have a very powerful graphics card, so it took about roughly 20 minutes to render.
okay,
But yeah, in terms of production and applying materials and all these things, about 2.5 hours or so, more or less. That's with dedication, like staying on there and just doing it without any pauses in between.
gotcha. I'm curious about something else I'm noticing on this image. Because does the render maybe have you apply an environment as a reflection that's maybe seeing through the building? And I bring that up because, like, in the back of the car, or like some
Hmm.
really reflective portions of the car, I feel like I'm looking at the outdoors, or I'm feeling that like there's a reflection of from the outdoors on the car. Or am I reading the reflection wrong?
I think you're reading it wrong because this is a very enclosed space, but I think what you are looking at probably it's the HDRI that I'm using inside of the actual in the environment. So there's HDRIs, which are images that have light sources within them. They're not just regular images; they have like a sun direction pattern, and you can use these to elevate your renders instead of just using the typical sunlight that comes as a very what's that word? A program like element within the software that just gives you like a default lighting system. Whereas HDRS gives you a bit more of a not really personal, but a bit more realistic look on how light hits an object in the real world instead of something that's made up. and it gives you also background elements as well. So I chose one that basically mimics what this is. And the reality is that HDRI specifically, it's a beach scene. So I think you
Mm.
might be grabbing some elements from that beach scene within that. I guess because on the actual like environment that this image sits in, a lot of the portions, like the top parts, are very perforated. So there's a lot of light holes in there. So I think that probably that's what's happening, is that you're reading some of that HDRI through those perforations. And because of that, it's being like shone upon the paint on the car because it's very
Yeah.
reflective. So I feel like you're getting a lot of that exterior elements from that scene.
It
That's probably why.
almost it almost stylizes the car even more though. I feel like
Yeah, I
it
mean, I
really
went through a bunch of
accentuates the shape. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I went through a bunch of different HDRIs too. Like it was just isn't one. It wasn't just one. Like there was probably 4 or 5 of them that I went through because some of them look like really dark, look really fake, and it wasn't sitting right with how the actual like context looked.
Yeah.
And again, by preference, me, I try to go more for the warmer look in some sense. I feel like you get a lot of, I don't know, it catches your eye a lot more when you get the warmer look versus something that's very blue or stagnant. Like this gives a bit more like a fluid look. And
Right.
then when you pop it with color, it gives a bit more like cherry on top of the cake. So, but yeah, with the reflections, man, like I was big. I don't know if you have the clay render up of that image.
I can pull it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So from I mean, basically my process too, like, which is what I found out now using 3ds Max and Corona, is that I tend to go more for initial concepts and ideas of what this thing is supposed to look like within a scene. I feel that light placement, light placement, shadow quality, I don't know, object alignments and reflections basically gives the end product what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And um by using clay renders, I feel that it gives you a bit more idea of what this object sits in, how the shadows are going to play out, how this thing's going to look like in that real scene. And then from that you can start applying color, because I feel color takes away from you noticing how something looks in terms of how the light placement is going to be, how shadows are going to have an effect on that scene. And color takes away from that. And by having like a neutral value, a neutral white, I feel your end product is going to be a lot more powerful because it's behind the scene items. The color is just a color, but then shadows and light and reflections are
Yeah.
what makes a render. So I think this project showed me that. And I think from now on, this is the way I approach things. So before any applying materials or if I do any rendering, architectural, product rendering, anything, clay renders are my number one go-to in some sense, because it gives me an understanding of how this thing sits in a space or how this thing has volume. And then from that, you can start applying material, reflective materials, matte materials, and it doesn't have an effect on how the result is going to be, because regardless, you're going to have a really nice shadow quality and light. So
Oh, totally. And softwares for that reason have an override function, right? Where you
right.
can basically apply the same material over everything.
Oh yeah. I mean, for this one, it's just a matter of hitting a button and it says override all materials, and it just overrides anything with geometry in that scene. So
Right.
it's just pretty cool.
Well, I wanted to show you, I suppose I can. Well, I just sent it to you. I'll pull it up here on
Mm-hmm.
screen. And this is a an image I created today. And
Oh, nice.
it's
That's pretty impressive.
so it's gonna take just a second here to pull it up. But now you tell me what software you think I used to make that.
Well, off the bat, it looks like a real-time render.
Okay.
And I say that because a lot of the shadow play. So I would say you used Twinmotion.
Twinmotion?
Mm-hmm.
Is that your final answer?
That is my final answer.
I tricked you, bro. This is Mid Journey.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Nice.
And there's one dead
So,
giveaway.
inaccuracy somewhere?
Yeah. If it took me a while to find it, but if you look at the front right of it, there's like these two sets of stairs that make no sense,
That
and they
just
just
go
get.
nowhere. That caught my eye first, but I didn't want to bring it up. Right? I wouldn't want to say Julian modeled that wrong, but
No, yeah, but
that's pretty cool, man. That's
it's so funny because I just repeatedly use the words Archviz, architectural visualization, hyperreal, photoreal, render, 3D, all those keywords, and I mean, this is pretty much what you see on architecture magazines.
yeah.
Just not if I zoom in on the furniture, it just totally loses out. but but
But I mean, you do get the concept or the idea of what you're trying to go for
yeah.
in some sense. Yeah. Pretty cool, man. See, that's why I say AI is probably getting there. I give it about 2 years at least before you start getting the accurate quality, in something. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we're already there, but I think when it comes to more personalization and just a little more accuracy, I feel that a lot of these softwares are going to become obsolete to me, man, because AI is just changing the game for everything.
Yeah. Well, so the way that it's not the way that I learned Blender, but I did take a course by Brelias. If anybody wants to check him out, Brellias. He's a 3D artist. He did some of the John Wick 3 posters. Wow. And in his course, he explains he always works off of the camera view. Like he sets it all up and he places the camera, and as he's like building out or adding elements to the model, and like as he's modeling is separate, but like when he's putting a scene together, it's all off the camera. And a big theme with me has been kind of taking things like this and reverse engineering it with a 3D software, like starting from the camera and like taking this now and actually building out this scene in 3D, matching it through perspective rather than through plan, because the tools are there. It's a really weird way of working if you're thinking like as a designer, but if you're thinking like I can just come up with a concept in Midjourney using an AI, I can build this out to scale, roughly off of the perspective, and then I can fix it or rationalize it or like develop it from there.
Right. I get you.
We're talking about a half day's worth of work there for something that might be totally useless, but it's still like a.
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily useless, but I get your point.
Yeah. Anywho, yeah, just thought I'd throw that in there. Come loop back around now into the AI. But yeah, man. Dude, before we part ways, any pieces of advice, any wisdom you've gained recently? Anything you've had your eye on, or what's next for you?
Well, actually, man, honestly, like one thing I would say is that try to try to get your feet wet in different things. Don't just subject yourself to one thing. There's a lot of different platforms that you can venture out into, and again, it's more on your personal preference. Again, if you're a person that doesn't like to really beat around the bush, learn about how to do something, you just want something quick and easy with quick turnarounds, use something like an interactive renderer. Don't kill yourself trying to learn a software or how to get the nits and gritties and how to create something. Whereas you could just jump onto like a quick interactive renderer or a real-time renderer, apply materials and get a quick output. Go for that. Don't kill yourself trying to learn something new and you're not really going to use it. You probably use it once or twice, or you just don't really care to do that at all. Or if you're the person that really it's nitpicky, you like detail, you're very picky at certain things, then venture out into that, jump into 3ds Max, jump into Blender, go behind the scenes, apply this learn how to actually apply materials correctly, add light and all these things to get really good effects and really nice post production results. Um, and yeah, I mean, just work on your lighting. Lighting is a big plus on everything, man. Like I've told you before, Julian, when we had conversations about how I learned that in order for you to get a decent lighting, like there's 4 or 5 lighting scenes in one scene, you will never know. Like you'll think it's one source, but it's a bunch of different like elements you're adding to that one single scene. And by looking at it, you won't know, you know. And but once you start learning how these methods are being like extinguished, like it's so amazing to see how like specific lights do different things, man. And it's just mind blowing, man. You know. And yeah, just stick to your preference. You know, everybody's not the same. And I mean, either way, you're gonna get great results because again, I'm not discriminating any of these softwares. They're all like top notch, pretty good. But again, they all do different things, and I feel that it all goes for personal preference with anyone. You know, if you want the easy way out, there's softwares for that. If you want more detail, there's softwares for that. You know, and just stick to it. You know, and again, I don't know if you want me to list like a couple of softwares people can like dive into. I mean, there's the normal ones that everybody knows, and like Lumion, Unreal Engine, Twinmotion. There's also another one called D5 Renderer, which is a Chinese uh, uh, software company that developed this for architecture as well. That's getting out there.
D5,
A
right?
lot
You're
of people,
talking about it's
yeah,
the
D5 Render,
yeah. It's
correct.
supposed to make animations really, really easy and super high
Yeah,
quality right off the bat.
but you get like really like decent quality, man. I'm talking about people that are switching from Corona and going to D5.
Yeah.
So it's that good. And it's an up and coming software. It's way cheaper than because Twinmotion is not free. There's a free version, but
Mm.
for you to get best quality, you know, 4K and up, you would have to pay. And I think it's like $500 or something like that they have it going for. And then D5 again is another paid software, but I think it's cheaper than Twinmotion, but you get a lot better results.
A lot more out of it.
And another thing too is that they can tweak your geometry, which is pretty cool. I learned this. Whereas like, you know, in the real world, there's no 90-degree object. They're always on every corner because you will cut yourself. On any corner, there's always like a fillet on the edge, regardless if it's like really minimal or not.
Like it's
And with
rounded or
D5,
imperfect or
yes, exactly. There's always imperfections. And with D5, it comes with a plugin that actually applies imperfections to every corner in your model. So you don't get 90 degrees, you know, there's always that touch of realism in there. So I think that I appreciated that a little bit because that's another step that I take too when I use these softwares. If I say, for instance, import from Revit to 3ds Max, I always go back and try to fillet all my edges so that they're not truly 90 degrees. They always have a little imperfection to that. Again, that gives you a lot of realism, especially when it comes to interior spaces as well. You start to see a lot of detail within that. And yeah, I think that's it, man.
Gotcha. Cool, man. Hey, well, hey, thanks for coming on and having this discussion. It's something we had talked about for quite a minute.
I do.
Just because, I mean, having this channel and this effort, I mean, we've talked about a little bit about what I'm doing with this, but something I've found lately is just how useful having these conversations are because the profession or the discipline, the tools, it's all evolving so quickly. We gotta talking to each other and how we're using it and what's going on. I think is just helping all of us find not just better solutions, but where really is our value in the process.
Right.
Because we
Trying to find a niche some way.
well, yeah, I mean, even niche, absolutely. And I was thinking more so in terms of like, we got to wrestle with this AI or automation or like whatever situation, this technological revolution in terms of what does that mean for us as designers? Because,
Right.
you know, designers might be all, you know, we want to be proud. We want to be happy with what we've done, but a lot of time that can lead to hubris or, you know, being all high and mighty and like, well, I'm a designer.
True.
Like, I'm not an AI. I'm a designer, you know, like I'm for real. And they don't think AI is going to catch up to them, which we can all adapt, but just thinking that because you're human, that holds more value, you know, that's so subjective, because ultimately the people that are paying the bills, they just want they just want it faster and better
Agreed.
and cheaper,
I agree.
right?
I totally agree.
um yeah, designers aren't buying from designers, right? We're all doing our own thing.
Exactly. At that point, can't
But
fight
yeah.
that.
All right, man. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it again. We also talked about doing a follow up, right? Are we on for
Yes,
that?
sir. I am
So
ready for that, man.
this follow up will be formatted a little bit differently. It'll be more like my usual live streams, except Kadeem will also be here. We'll be going off against each other, quote unquote, right? Sort of a challenge. So we already said we're both going to do a little bit of prep work, get some assets together, right? And do we want to announce a theme? Do we want to
I was
announce?
gonna say, I was thinking about that. Do you want to create a similar theme, or should it be something different but in the same spectrum to see the difference? But then I feel like, eh, I feel that they should see a same result with two different sides. So I feel like
Okay.
we should have the same scene assets, but then you start to see the difference within using one software within
Versus the
another,
other.
and then you
Okay.
start to see the differences. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, or you
Yeah.
rather create two different elements,
Why don't we do like
or just have you and I do separate ones, and then let AI create something, and then see how we can.
who can match the AI quickest? That would be
Basically.
interesting. That would be interesting. Yeah, I think one of those two could work. I'm thinking right now it could be car related, since that's an overlap we both have. Probably have some stuff we can pull from already. Um, Something like a retail activation for a car at like some Art Basel situation type thing. And if that's too crazy, maybe we do the AI thing. We just ask an AI to do an Archviz scene, and then we just like go at it and try to replicate it
I think
as
the
close as
car one
possible.
sounds a little more interesting, man.
Sounds a little more interesting, but maybe a bit more ambitious too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I agreed.
All right, but we'll announce that once we come to a consensus, and but yeah, that should be yeah. We'll announce time, date, places right here,
Yeah, let's plan it
and
out, man.
yeah,
Sounds fun.
cool. All right, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Kadeem, for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to the
Thanks
next
for
time,
having me,
man.
man. Appreciate it.
For sure. Cheers.
Alrighty, man. Have a good
All
one. See
right,
you guys.
you too.